Kind of leaning heavy to the one side.
Good evening. Welcome to this regular council meeting, Thursday, December the 21st, 2023. I'd like to acknowledge that we're holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Klamath Nation. We will start with meeting announcements. Opening meeting. Does any councillor have? Yes, Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to announce that the solstice officially will be happening in 27 minutes, which is something I truly celebrate, the light coming back. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Almeida.
Thank you, Worship. Take the opportunity to wish our community a wonderful Christmas season. In terms of events, I just came from a little skate at the Winter Wonderland, and that is still going on at the complex all the way till December 31st. So check the calendar online. Plenty of sessions that are available. And our sports teams are taking a break for Christmas, but the Kings will be back on the ice right before the new year, December 29th and 30th. We got a couple new players that are making their appearance at home for the first time. And the Regals will be home the following weekend, the 5th and 6th. So plenty of hockey over the holiday break to enjoy in the evenings.
Isaacs.
Thank you, Mayor Wasno. Yeah, reiterating my wishes, holiday wishes to our community, and also wanted to echo the mayor's got a radio announcement out right now, and wishing people a festive season, and also encouraging people to shop local. So a lot of people are going to be making some last minute purchases perhaps before Christmas for those who celebrate, and highly encourage everyone to support local business and keep the local economy and the money flowing through it. Thanks.
I'd just like to point out that we have a interesting agenda tonight. There's going to be significant discussion on important issues to our community. And I'm confident that this will be done in a respectful manner. And would just ask the individuals in the audience to not clap, cheer, or hiss, depending on what is being said and your own personal interests. So thank you very much. CAO, did you have any announcements? Let's move to the adoption of the agenda.
Move adoption.
We have a seconder, seconded by Councillor Southcott. Do we have any discussion on the agenda? All in favor? Passed unanimously. We'll now move to the adoption of the minutes, and I believe we can adopt both minutes if there is no discussion required. Okay, seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Let's move now to 6, which is committee reports. So we have the committee of the whole meeting held December the 5th, 2023, and we have the minutes.
Like me to go through that, Mr. Mayor?
Please.
It was an interesting evening. We had Dr. Varma was here making a presentation on the temporary use permit 011. Roger Whitaker came to talk to us about harbor insurance requirements. We have an email about the Special Olympics tree mulch. We talked about that. Pretty in-depth community engagement reports from councillors. We talked about the harbor insurance requirements for people who have boats in the harbor, curbside collection options for composting and garbage and recycling, the government's policy for liaison policy, which is coming up again on the agenda tonight, and a number of other things like the procedure bylaw, and that wrapped up today. It was a full agenda that night.
Thank you. Does council have any additional? All right, we'll move to item 7, which are committee recommendations, starting with 7.1, Business Retention and Expansion Program. CAO?
Through the chair to council. So the committee recommendation for this particular item is about the Business Retention and Expansion Program. Forwarding the recommendation from the Committee of the Whole, the Committee of the Whole was recommending to council that staff be directed to decline the request from WorkSafe BC to provide a financial contribution of $25,000 to support a business extension program. This program has been supported by the city for several years, and staff are recommending that council discontinue that, and council forwarded that on to from the Committee of the Whole to council for consideration tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Isaacson.
Yeah, I can make the motion coming from the committee. I move that council direct staff to respectfully decline the request from Work BC Powell River to provide a financial contribution of $25,000 to support the extension of the Business Retention and Expansion Program contract for 2024.
Any discussion? Councillor Isaacson.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a few points. I think it has been a really great relationship between Work BC and the City of Powell River, and I think the people who have been doing this sort of work and supporting local businesses and understanding needs, their greatest interest is that some sort of relationship with small business and local business and the city continue, whether that's whoever does that. And so I suspect once in this report, staff mentioned it would be important to assess the outcomes of this work and what's most needed and how things might align with the council's strategic plan that will come to us hopefully in the new year. And so I support this motion that came from Committee of the Whole.
Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Worship. I had a meeting with a businessman this afternoon who is facing stresses from taxes and all sorts of stresses. Downturns due to less cash in the community to support local business. I know there have been stresses through the years. Having been in small business that served community many years ago for many years, it's very clear to me how our small business community provides a real heart for our community from an economic standpoint because of the amount of capital or money that flows within our community. I trust that our staff are going to find ways to continue the good work of previous manager or director Scott Randolph. And I'm grateful for the work that has been done in past years. So I'm really trusting we can continue to find ways to support small business in this community. Thank you.
We have a motion on the floor. Councillor Doak.
Yeah. I'm supporting this motion. I said same thing on Tuesday night, mostly because of the information we had from staff about what's going to happen to our budget in the next year and the necessity to cut wherever we have an option to cut anything. That's why I'm going to vote in favor of this. I don't, I really don't think that the work can be replaced without having a person dedicated to do the job or funds to do it. But I'm looking at it simply through the budgetary funding option. I think when we have to realize when we stop paying for things, we're going to stop getting services. That's kind of ridiculous to pretend otherwise.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor that's been seconded. All in favor? Passed unanimously. We'll now move to item 7.2, which is the Library Service Agreement Renewal with qathet Regional District. Forward from our Committee of the Whole on December the 19th. Yes, Councillor Almeida.
I move that council approve a renewal of the 2018 Library Service Agreement between the Powell River Library Board and qathet Regional District for a 5-year term beginning January 1st, 2024, referenced as Library Service Agreement Renewal with qathet Regional District dated December 11th, 2023.
Seconder. Councillor Southcott seconded. Do you have any comments? Great. I'll move the motion. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Excuse me. Item 7.3, Council Remuneration Bylaw. This was also brought forward from the Committee of the Whole, December 19th meeting. We have the report and we have the appendix. Does anybody wish to? Yes, Councillor Palm.
Yes, this had a lot of discussion in regards to this issue on Tuesday. I'm going to read the motion that was brought forward in that meeting and then open it up for discussion. I will move that council continue with annual remuneration and reimbursement of expenses into 2024 in accordance with the City of Powell River Council Remuneration and Reimbursement Bylaw 2560, 2019, with no adjustment to the 2023 rates, and direct staff to report back to council at the end of August 2024 with recommendations for mayor and council remuneration and reimbursement for 2024 to 2028 without using an independent professional.
We have a seconder. Councillor Palm, do you wish to speak?
Sorry, Your Worship, the phone was ringing in my ear. Sorry, what did you just ask?
Oh, we have the motion which has been seconded. And
Very good. So I will just reiterate what I said short order on Tuesday in a brief statement, and that is the 15 years that I've been here started with $15,000, and I made a mistake on Tuesday saying that it only had gone up 50% since that time. But when you look at our current salary, that salary has doubled, which means a 100% increase over those 15 years. We get paid well for what we do, in my estimation. And in terms of our finances, as Councillor Dowd has already alluded to tonight, we need to save every penny that we can and wait till the new year to see what assessments bring in terms of the mill site and the dam and other properties in our community. We don't know what kind of financial shape we're going to be in, so I am recommending that we hold the line on any type of increase. Staff was recommending 2%. I'm not in favor of that at this time. And we'll have a clearer picture going forward in the new year. But from what I am hearing, the tax situation in our community is not going to be looking rosy come June of 2024. I don't think I have to say much more than that, Your Worship.
thank you. Any further comment before? Yes, Councillor Isaacs.
Thank you, Mayor Wesno. I also support this recommendation in the sense that I agree with Councillor Palm. We will have tough financial discussions next year. And so this is an easier one to make because the only impact is to us. But I do want to emphasize that in order to attract a diversity of candidates, the pay has to make it possible, not even attractive, but possible for people to make it work in their lives. And so when I support this motion, it's because it's okay for me, but when I think about attracting candidates for the next election, I want to make sure that it's possible for people who don't have independent wealth or don't have pensions to rely on, who are trying to make it work by juggling jobs. And so while I support this motion, it doesn't mean that I support holding the line or cutting in the future. But what's on the table tonight is for next year, and I support what's on the table.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I want to add just a little element to what Councillor Isaacson is saying. When I first sat on council, I had another full-time job and quasi-management type responsibilities in that job. I had to take off so much time in order to do an adequate job here that I actually made less gross than had I simply done the other full-time job that I had. And I just wanted to mention that. I'm not asking for any kudos or anything like that, but that's the kind of sacrifice that the job around this table, if people are going to actually do an adequate job of representing the community and making responsible decisions, there's a phenomenal amount to learn and to know. So it takes considerable dedication. And I just wanted to mention that because at least compensation needs to consider that. People need to live. So I was glad to do that. And I know anybody who sits here does as well. But there is sacrifice in there, and it is a profound commitment. So I just wanted to add that because it's going to be part of the considerations down the road. We can tighten our belts, but we all have to survive as well. Thank you, Worship.
We have a motion on the floor that's been seconded. All in favor? Passed unanimously. We move now to item 7.4, which is the 2024 meeting schedule. And again, this is brought forward from the Committee of the Whole, December 19th meeting.
I can take it. Move that 2024 Council Committee of the Whole and special meeting schedule is approved as recommended by the Committee of the Whole.
Seconder? Councillor Isaacson, second. Do we have any discussion on this?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we hashed out the differences on the schedule perfectly fine on Tuesday. I think as we get into the new year, we're already planning on doing a procedures workshop. And while we have dates lined up for right now, our procedures workshop will help us review some timings. And I could foresee us looking at maybe examining, is 7 o'clock the ideal time to start a council meeting if we're having some heavy agendas like we have today. So I look forward to workshopping that in the new year to find a time that might be a little bit more amenable to us and everyone else involved. But otherwise, I'm in support of our schedule as is.
Do we have a motion? All in favor? Opposed?
Just like to say a couple of words, Your Worship.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
Very pleased to see that we are returning to a Committee of the Whole and regular council meeting schedule. Up until over the last year, it has been a little difficult, I believe, not only for members of the public, but for members of the council to understand when our next meetings are happening because things were changed quite drastically as they were orchestrated previously. So I'm very happy to see this change, and I think it'll serve us well in terms of the commitment to communication that we need to make to the population of this community. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. I'm going to call the motion. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Move to 7.5, which is the government policy and liaison policy, which was referred again from the Committee of the Whole on December the 5th. We have a recommendation. Yes, Councillor Isaacson.
Yes, I move that council approve the governance and liaison policies as attached to the December 21st, 2023 agenda.
We have a second, seconded. Councillor Almeida. Yes, Councillor Isaacson.
I'll just speak briefly to it. I think the only main change that came out of discussions at Committee of the Whole, there was a thought from staff that perhaps councillors could provide written community engagement reports in advance of a meeting, but we decided that would be challenging and we're not interested in that. So I think that's the main difference from the suggestion coming to us on December 5th. But in general, these two policies are about council's liaison work with the community, removing a portfolio system so that we don't confuse staff interactions with council, and add a community a liaison type appointment component so that the ways in which we do interact with community, especially organizations that have requested a specific counselor be involved, that's just outlined a little bit more clearly on what our responsibilities and limits and expectations are related to that. Thank you.
Call the question. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Next item is 7.6. Yes, Councillor Dodd.
I'll make one of the recommendations that's in the package, and that is to, number one, to direct staff follow the 2023 5-year financial plan bylaw 2715/2023 and discontinue Zunga bus operations on December 31st, 2023 to provide public notification.
Seconder. Councillor Palm.
We had a long discussion about this on Tuesday night, and I've said it before. This is going to cost an extra $100,000 for this pilot that began. That was going to go for 6 months. Cost $100,000 for the community last year. This year it would cost $213,000 that would be coming directly from the coffers of the taxpayers. They come from a reserve, but whatever it is, city funds. And I don't think we can afford to do that in times when we've asked staff to come back to us with a report on how to cut 20% of our budget, or somewhere around $2 million out of our budget going forward. So we're going to sacrifice services somewhere. I think this is one of the ones that we can afford to sacrifice. It serves a limited number of people in a limited area, and I just don't think we can afford it where we are now. I'd like to see it expanded, but that would talk about moving to more like $500,000 of funding instead of 200,000.
Thank you. Councillor Almeida.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, we had a lengthy discussion on Tuesday about this that ended up in a stalemate. We might end up in the same result today. But all of us in council received a litany of emails over the last 48 hours, several to keep the Zunga bus, several to drop it. I didn't get a chance to count to see which one was more or less the other one, but I did have a chance to dive in a little deeper, to read a little into the past about our Zunga bus, which has only been in existence for about 2.5 years. And there was something that continuously came up in several emails and even some comments by councillors with regards to Tuesday's report. And it focused on, in the report, where it stated the number of regular users that had used the service in the past, in a 30-day period. Whether it was the past 30 days or not, I don't know, but in a 30-day period, they referenced that there were 22 regular users that used the service in that 30-day period. And unfortunately, that report, and I'm not blaming anyone by any means, is not my intent, but when statistics and data are displayed, they can present a certain picture that can skew the perspective of the report and the intention. So in the report, it talked about 22 regular users that had used the service 11 or more times in a 30-day period. And what it didn't say is how many times those 22 people used the service. So from the report, I can gather that 178,000 rides happened in a 10-month period, worked out to about 38 per day as per the report. So in a 30-day, 31-day period, that's about 1,187 rides. So I did ask staff, but I know it was a busy couple of days, so it wasn't a chance to calculate it. So using the numbers that the report provided, those 22 people took the Zunga bus anywhere from 360 to 540 times. I don't know the exact number because everything was a range. But out of 1,100 rides, there was about 40% of those rides that were done by those 22 people. That meant there's 60% of those rides, over 600 of them, that were done by other residents in this community. So I wanted to clear that up because it's not a Zunga service that's not operated for 22 people. It just happened to be that 22 people used it 11 or more times in the month. We don't know how many people used it 10 or more times in the month or 5 or more times in the month. There's 600 other rides that happened in that service. It could have been from 600 other people. It could have been from 300 people using it twice in the time period. So there were several emails that responded to that members of the community thought that the Zunga bus only served 22 people. And if that was the case, I would definitely be voting in a slightly different way. But I'm one of those people that rode it less than 11 times in a month. And I'm sure there's plenty of others that are in that same boat. And so this is not a service that if we take away is going to affect 22 people. This is going to affect several hundred people in our community that are using the service. I would agree with Councillor Doubt. It needs to be expanded. And there was a vote done by the previous council to expand it and budget set aside to expand it. I know the logistics behind the vehicle might have, and also the logistics behind staffing might have prevented some of that expansion. I'm not too sure where the budget that was put aside for that expansion went if we didn't actually expand the service. That would be something I'd be curious about. But the Zunga bus in 2023 was funded completely by Climate Action Reserve. The staff proposal for this year, if we were to do it again, would be funded completely by Climate Action Reserve. And the volume of emails that we got over the last 2 days, it made me think exactly 2 months ago, as is in the report, Council approved an expansion of conventional transit for 2025 at the tune of $185,000. And I can't remember a single email that we received from the community that complained about a similar size investment that was actually going to increase tax dollars. So I agree the Zunga bus isn't perfect. I also would feel that as a city and as a council, there's many more things that can be done to communicate the actualness of the service and the fact that it's there, and to increase the ridership and expand the service. I'd like to see it to Townside and Cranberry and Wildwood. I don't disagree, and there might be a cost that comes to it, but we've done this for 2.5 years, and I feel like we haven't given it a fair share. There's more opportunity there. I think there's still potential for BC Transit to get on board at some point, but if we shut it down, that'll be the end of it, probably for good. And I agree, we need to make some cuts. I just don't feel like this is the cut to make at this point.
I'm going to ask the CAO, given that Councillor Almeida has indicated he's a user of this service, is he in a conflict of interest on this?
To the chair, I'm going to hand over to Ms. Laporte on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Because it's offered to any member of the public, my first instinct would be to say likely not. However, it would be up to Councillor Almeida to declare a conflict of interest himself, and he could seek independent legal advice if he wishes to do so to confirm that, but that would be up to him to make that decision.
Thank you. Councillor Almeida, do you feel you have a conflict of interest?
Considering what I've been told on the conflict of interest is making a financial gain from the service, I can't see how me riding the Zunga bus would be a conflict of interest. I would have also then been in conflict of interest when we voted on public transit 2 months ago, which I ride as well.
Thank you. Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can't support this resolution. I would support extending the budgeting and the cost covering of the Zunga bus for a month until we get to actually know figures connected to what we're very afraid of at this point. And I'm aware of a lot of fear going on. It comes up in conversation every day as far as what we're going to have in revenues to this community for taxes. We're not going to know some pretty significant numbers until January. So I really struggle with this decision. But here's the real reason, and as far as timing, I'm canning it right now on the basis of things that we're afraid of, but that we don't actually have numbers for. And we may have numbers that then will justify doing what it seems we're going to probably do tonight collectively here. But here's why I do object to this, and that is because we've discussed a lot over the years. We've discussed how transit, active transportation, et cetera, are not only good for GHG reduction, but they serve an increasing sector of our population that is having increasing difficulty affording transportation, private transportation, and housing, and everything else, costs of living. We all know that there is this pressure that is basically economically squeezing down and down and down. And we see more in the lower levels. We see more people with greater difficulty, and we're pretty aware, I think, of the poverty levels in this community, which are higher than the average in British Columbia. So the way this is financed is by people who are taxpayers. The way the Zunga bus is financed, it's by people of greater means than, I believe, than the average of people who use it. So what this is within our own community, it's somewhat of a transfer of costs from people who are more able to afford a service to people who are less, providing a service for people who are less capable than those of us who are more capable, in spite of the fact that we're all facing tax pressures and cost of living pressures. That's why I don't support this right now. Those are the two reasons why I don't support this right now. I would really like us to give this another month while we can find out what the actual numbers are and what we're really facing, and make decisions on the basis of a much larger picture than just canning it right now because we're afraid of what we probably have good reason to be afraid of. Thank you, Worship.
Your Worship, first of all, I want to start by thanking all of the members of the public that wrote personal emails to staff and council on this subject this week after Tuesday. Our inboxes were flooded, pro and con, and a lot of them are very well written, and they contain a lot of information, and there's a lot of heartstrings being tugged this way and that way. But in terms of where we are financially, and I think Councillor Southcott, here's the point that I'd like to make so that you hear it loud and clear. We had our first budget delivery. We were staring at a page that said 9% increase in taxes next year. The citizens of this community. That's a starting point. And in light of what we have learned since then, the 34% increase in RD taxes to the city, which you will all be receiving, in light of the Resource Recovery Center that's going to add expenses at the midpoint in year when it starts operation, when we have to start paying back that debt on an annual basis. We have to start paying for staff to run that center. That's the tune of right now estimated at 1.6 million. That's not an easy number to handle in terms of taxes, as we all know. And I could go on and on about taxes and where we're going, but I won't belabor that point anymore. I think Councillor Southcott, you get my point. We know where we're at, between a rock and a hard place. So when you examine the Zunga cost, and staff have done a great job of preparing Appendix A. I don't know if the public has access to that, but it just points out in terms of cost per ridership on our conventional system, it costs, out of all those rides, that over 1 million rides that individuals take, it costs the city $4. Provide that ride. Or our Handy Dart, which is a must to help those in need that are not mobile, it's $22 per ride. But on the Zunga bus, which is, as I said, Tuesday, adding on to our conventional system, it's a luxury. We didn't have it up until the pilot. And now we're asking for $200,000+ to run it, and that's at $13 per ride. That's a heavy subsidy. And as I say, it's a luxury. So we have to be realistic of where we are in the financial frontier and just say, sorry, until we find a new source of wealth in this community, we cannot provide that service. And I would love to. I'm hoping we can revisit it and BC Transit comes to the table in 2 years' time after they do their on-demand system in Kelowna to gauge it for use elsewhere. Hopefully they'll come back to us and say, yeah, we'll fund one of your Zunga buses. I'm hopeful because they know we've gone down the pilot road. We've subsidized it to the tune of 100,000 last year, but we've got to hold the line right now. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. I'm fully supportive of Councillor Dout's motion for slightly different reasons, but also some the same. The Zunga bus is another example of the province downloading on Powell River. The lake is to spend 220,000 next year, and that undoubtedly will have significant increases in the following years. And if in fact we want to service the whole community, as Councillor Dout has pointed out, we're more than likely looking at $500,000 a year. Now, let's put into perspective, what does $220,000 a year or $500,000 a year mean potentially to improve the lives of the citizens of Powell River? I want you to think about what the new library has brought in terms of benefit to the city. Cost of the loan, $3.2 million loan, is $155,000 a year. So on one hand, we have a library, which is a wonderful facility. So let's be creative. Right now, whenever I talk to the hospital, they say a major recruitment problem they have with medical staff is the lack of childcare. So what if we was creative and said, let's use $220,000 a year, one of our properties, and let's build a community center where there is childcare, where there is a medical clinic, and where there's an opportunity for medical professionals coming in to look at Powell River could stay. This is something that Campbell River has done an excellent job of doing. So we've heard from a very small majority that there is some advantage to this, and we've heard from a small majority that there are major disadvantages to this. So what I would like to suggest is, I read all of the information that our former councillor, Carol Ann Leishman, has provided, and the same with Lisa Moffat and others. And what I'd like to suggest to them is go out and raise the money. I've raised over $15 million in different communities where I lived for projects that people felt passionate about. So they clearly feel passionate about this experiment. I'd be quite happy to introduce them to professors at UBC, UVic, or Simon Fraser that I've worked with in the past, who would likely be quite excited about working on this experiment. So that's a simple challenge. We have alternatives. We have volunteers, we have non-for-profits, and we clearly have a couple of capable individuals who feel very strongly about this. So let's encourage them to go out and raise the money. In a nutshell, there is no justification that I can see to burden our citizens with a huge tax increase. So what is this going to mean? Perhaps the parents of boys and girls who love to play hockey might find out that they've cut one of the rinks at the rec center as part of our deficit reduction program. So their kids can no longer play hockey. The same could occur at other parks and recreation facilities that families rely on. And so when you compare that with the question of whether or not people who before Zunga could move around, simply use that initiative again to do that, compared with the impact on families and individuals in this city, I can see no justification. Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Mayor Wasno. So this conversation's not over because the Zunga bus is on the draft one of the financial plan. And so we're going to be discussing this again in January. So the issue right now is the current 5-year plan that started in 2023 doesn't have service continuing on into January. And so those conversations in January are going to be important because at that point we will have a complete picture of both of our assessment role as well as the suite of possible cuts that staff think will be that are kind of offered for consideration and things that we might do in order to try to make next year as smooth as possible from a tax perspective. I don't know how I will vote in January about Zunga bus because I want to have the full information when I do so. You know, the Zunga bus is heavily subsidized. It's subsidized by our Climate Action Reserve Fund from a grant. It does not come from tax revenue. What it does impact in using that money is it means that there's less money for other climate action initiatives. And so this isn't taking money from recreation, but it would take money from other climate action initiatives. So my concern right now is that this service could end as of January 1 in 10 days. There are people who rely on the service and in very important ways. It's heavily used. We've heard in our emails from seniors at Kiwanis, at Sunset Homes, inclusion clients. I think that the Zunga bus is a representation of the overlap between climate action and poverty reduction. But my main concern right now, and again, we hashed this out on Wednesday, I feel like we're going to stalemate again tonight, is the notice and people not being able to make alternative plans, because who we are impacting here are not people who are treating this as a luxury, but people who are treating this as a basic need. Thank you very much.
Councillor Almeida.
Thank you, Your Worship. As members in the gallery can see, we're short one person today. Councillor Elliott's in a plane as we speak, which unfortunately also doesn't have Wi-Fi, so which is going to be the cause of a potential stalemate as it was on Tuesday. And had she been here, the rest of the council received an email from Councillor Elliott today, so we all know where she would stand on the situation. And she would be very much in favor of keeping the Zunga bus going. Unfortunately, we cannot count her vote today because she's not here, but it also allows her to bring the matter back up again for reconsideration later on. So I would just like to urge our council to, Councillor Isaacson had made an motion on Tuesday about even just giving it 3 months. I'm not opposed to the suggestions the mayor has made. Let's go raise some money. I was thinking today, who can we get to sponsor the Zunga bus? I mean, local business, somebody else who can. There's plenty of yellow on that bus that we can throw a logo on there and make it a corporate Zunga bus, if that's going to help. We've got Temco that sponsors one of the conventional buses. Why can't we have someone sponsoring the Zunga bus? I'm not opposed to those solutions, but I feel like those solutions are going to be easier to generate when there's actual service there that we can put it on. To cut the service, completely stop it, and then try to build it back up, I think it's going to be a lot more challenging to do. And I think, let's give it a few more months. Let's get to that tax rate. Let's get a better picture where we're at, but let's not cut things right now when we've got the reserve funds to be able to do it. It won't impact taxes, and we can still service this community and find a better way to do it. And I think give the Zunga bus a fair shake, which we haven't done yet.
Councillor Doak.
Yeah. So Just want to clarify a couple of things. First, I'm objecting to going ahead with the Zunga bus for two reasons. One is because of the additional cost to the taxpayer in 2024 in the face of a possible 9% tax increase if we don't provide cuts to the budget. The CFO provided us a report in December that looked at all of the costs for the city and recommended $500,000 in cuts on the face of it to begin with, and then came back with a report later in December saying that staff is looking for a 10% cut in expenditures. And you can't make 10% cuts if you keep increasing it. So I'm looking at the tax level. I'm looking at who pays for the service that they get. I'm not arguing that it isn't a great service and it doesn't do a really nice job of what it does. What I'm saying is we can't afford it. It doesn't provide service to everybody, but everybody pays for it. If you're a taxpayer in the city, you're paying taxes and you're paying for the operation of the Zunga bus. That's the way it is. In the neighborhood where I live in Wildwood, people pay in their taxes for the Zunga bus and can't get service. They get a transit service and I use it when I can. It's rare that I can actually get to where I want to go at the right time, but I use it. At the same time, in that same report that we had from the CFO in December, there was a recommendation that we stop using the fire hall in Wildwood. There were 20-some people at a meeting of the Wildwood ratepayers last week talking about the Wildwood Fire Hall and how valuable it is to those taxpayers in Wildwood who pay for the Zunga bus and pay for the Wildwood Fire Hall. But one of the recommendations in the package is to close the Wildwood Fire Hall to save $13,000, not $200,000, but $13,000. I'm balancing those things and seeing which is more appropriate for the taxpayers to pay for. And in the midst of the debate, there's been two suggestions. One is that automatically somehow this is going to come up for a revote in January. And the other one is that a person who's not here tonight can ask to have a reconsideration of the meeting. And I'd like the corporate officer or the CAO to tell us if those are real options. Is there automatically going to be a vote in January on the Zunga bus service? And can a person who's not at the meeting ask for a reconsideration of a motion when they haven't voted on it?
Through the chair, I'm going to pass over to our deputy corporate officer here. However, my understanding is yes, a council member who is not present can ask for it to be reconsidered and have council vote on the reconsideration. I'll pass it over to see if she has anything additional.
Through the chair, I believe that's also correct. The reconsideration would be brought back to be voted on whether it's reconsidered or not. And then if that passes, then you can then debate the motion again.
So are you saying that according to our rules of order, anyone can ask for a reconsideration? Who exactly can ask for a reconsideration?
I'll double check, but I believe that if you voted against the motion, you can't ask for a reconsideration.
I think that the rules of order say if you voted in favor, you can ask for a reconsideration if you have 2/3 support. I could be wrong.
Perhaps we can.
We don't have
report back.
We don't have to iron that out here. It's just a question.
I would like to make a couple additional comments. If I was the mayor of a municipality that had the lowest tax rate in British Columbia, as opposed to either one of the highest or the highest, I might give the Zunga bus some consideration. So if I'm in West Vancouver, the average home income is probably $300,000 a year, probably not a major consideration. But here it clearly is. It's been suggested that if we approve this motion, there might be pain and anguish in starting it up again if somebody comes along with money. Well, my 40 years of business experience says this is not valid. The thing started up once again. We've got very competent staff here. It can be fired up very quickly. Actually, the province decided not to put the money into Powell River, but instead to send it to Kelowna. So that should give you some thought as to how they perceive the success of our program. It would have been logical for them to come here, but they didn't. And they haven't stepped up and said, oh, by the way, but we will give you additional money. The final point I want to make is whether or not Councillor Elliott would have voted in favor or against this motion is pure speculation. The one thing every councillor is expected to do is to bring an open mind to a council meeting, to listen to the information that's presented, and then make a decision. So in my mind, Councillor Elliott may well have listened to the information put on the table here and voted in favor of Councillor Dout's motion. Do you have any additional comments? Councillor Palm.
Your Worship, having heard the discussion, I have a couple of points that I want to touch on. First of all, I want to clarify our procedure bylaw and how that works. And if you voted for this item, you have the power to bring it back down the road. If you voted against it, you don't have the power to ask for reconsideration. Correct?
Through the chair, the CFO, our deputy, is going to give us some.
Through the chair, so I double checked so any member of council may bring back a motion for reconsideration. It's when a council member who voted in the affirmative for a resolution that's been adopted can move to rescind that motion. So if they would like to rescind, they can only bring that back to do so if they voted in the affirmative. Otherwise, any member of council can bring back a motion for reconsideration. Council votes on whether or not you reconsider it, and then if that passes, you debate that motion again.
So the follow-up question to that is, if you aren't in attendance in the original vote, can you ask for reconsideration?
Through the chair, the procedure bylaw doesn't specify that you have to be in attendance. It just says a member of council.
Okay, very good. So we may be faced with dealing with this again, and so be it. But I want to just make a couple of points that people keep bringing up. First of all, the Climate Action Reserve. We came to make reference to that like it's magical dollars. It's not magical dollars. It's taxpayers' money. Well, let's not have any warm and fuzzies over Climate Action Reserve. It's all taxpayers' funds. So the city is responsible for in terms of our residents. And lastly, the report that we got stipulated that there are digital upgrades coming to our conventional system so that you will be able to see where that bus is on each of the routes and be able to time your catching that bus and not having to wait all night and day. Mr. Burtick, do you want to comment on when those additions to our conventional system will be up and running?
Through the chair, if I may, that system is currently in place via Next Ride. So you can see where the bus is at any time at this point. And we're working towards a digital payment system, UMO, and that's going to take place in January. January 10th, we should have the digital payment method coming through, but the Next Ride is in place today.
very happy to hear that. Thank you, Worship.
We've had a healthy exchange of ideas and information. I'd like to call the motion. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. We will now, yes, Councillor Isaacson.
I know it's going to end in the same way, but in the sake of expressing my wishes, I'd love to make the same motion that I made on Monday, expecting that the same vote will happen. But I move to amend the 2023 5-year financial plan to fund Zunga bus operation until March 31st, 2024, include Zunga bus operations in upcoming budget deliberation meetings, and begin public notification of the possible upcoming end of service.
You have a motion which has been seconded. All in favor? Opposed? We'll now move to reports for decision. 8.1 is the Development Variance Permit 280-Lot 4, Atlin Avenue. We have a recommendation based on a motion that Councillor Southcott had made at a previous meeting.
Like me to make it again? Sure. I move that the development variance permit
Point of
280.
order?
Sorry.
Are we supposed to ask if anyone wishes to provide comment first? Our meeting?
Would anybody like to provide comment in the gallery or online? So Southcott?
Thanks, Your Worship. I move that development variance permit 280 to vary City of Powell River infrastructure design and construction bylaw 2225/2009 by waiving the requirement for sanitary sewer main extension and permitting of private on-site septic service to a new single-family dwelling on a property legally described as Lot 4, District Lot 2358, Group 1, New Westminster District Plan EPP 57771 be issued.
Seconder, Councillor Isaacson, seconded. Councillor Southcott.
Just as a quick review, this is a lot that's on the east side of Atlin Avenue or Street in Wildwood, where there is no sewer main, sanitary sewer main. As well, without saving us a whole bunch of detail, a number of in fact, the majority of dwellings on Atlin do have their own septic systems. It's one of the very few places where septic systems still exist in the city. Our infrastructure design and construction bylaw has provision for, as an alternate to septic sewer provision, no, as an alternate to, sewer provision, sanitary sewer provision, septic systems on A1. Interestingly, the lots that are, no, A2, large lot rural. A1 is actually the zoning for most of the lots that are already served by septic systems. But not to get us all confused with details, it's an area where if a sewer system was put in, residents could be required to connect. And that is possible due to long-term intentions of subdivision there, but this is nowhere in the near future. So I do support this. It makes most sense for the applicant and also for the region for the moment. And I'll just remind us that many years ago, when a sewer system was put in, the sanitary sewer line was put in back of Cranberry Lake, all of the residents along there were required to hook up. And that could be done again in the future. Thank you. Here in that one.
See no other comments, so I'm going to move the motion. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Now move to 8.2, which is a temporary use permit 001, top 001, Lift Community Services Extreme Weather Response Center. Does anybody wish to provide comment on the proposed permit? Please come forward, and if you would let us know your name, that would be great.
Good evening. My name is Scott Gibson. Just before I get into my little speech here, I was given by Dr. Varma an hour and 5 minutes ago, the Good Neighbor Agreement. This mythical piece of paper was supposed to have been given to us as residents across from the warming center. It never did get to us. I asked my neighbors in case I missed getting it. They agree. They've never seen it. The first 4 stipulations in it, I've never seen that either. So it's nice that Ms. Jenkins at the last meeting admitted to everyone that she won't send her staff across the street. Why? Because it's not safe. So basically, Ms. Jenkins and Lyft stated that it's not safe where I live. It was safe before they showed up. Just something happened and now it's not safe for them. So I'll go into what my wife wrote up for me. We live at Joyce Commons across the street from the CRC lift shelter and the proposed severe weather shelter. Joyce Commons is a 55+ development. 75% of those are single women over the age of 80, many born and raised in Powell River, and chose this location as they no longer drive and are able to walk to stores and services a lot around the area. My 86-year-old neighbor now has to walk the long way around to the mall as it is unsafe for her to go across the street. We have been aggressively panhandled on our decks. This is a retirement community. They're asking us for donations for whatever. We had a man living at the shelter. I'm not saying that lightly. I identified him to the RCMP who told me that's where he's from. And he was very aggressive towards me because I asked him, like, as far as I'm concerned, people walking down looking. What are they looking for? Leave that to you. Okay, so our neighbors now, our neighbors now have to hang their Christmas wreaths on the inside of their door, as if they're on the outside of the door at night, they go missing. It was safe when we moved in here 3 years ago. As I said, Ms. Jenkins said it's not safe for my staff to go across the road. The only change has been the arrival of the lift shelter. Dr. Varma said things seem to have been better in the last couple of weeks on that side of the road. That is not the case on our side of the road. 4 of our neighbors have had items stolen. A person who was kicked out of the shelter was pounding on our doors at 4 a.m. That's not a good neighbor, what this agreement says. Lyft says that they do hourly perimeter checks. We have seen this happen one time. A staff came out and pick up needles and garbage. They do not come over and pick up needles on our side of the street. I guess that's up to us. We have watched drug deals in the parking lot. We've watched open drug use and the sirens of the ambulance and fire engines going sometimes 3 times in a week to the lift center. In the middle of the night, it wakes us up. City officials seem unwilling to enforce the compliance of Lyft. Yet, a city employee had the time twice to come and count all the plants in our landscape. Make sure that the developer is living up to his end of the bargain.
Just 1 second, please. CAO, would you comment on the appropriateness of that request?
Through the chair, if the speaker would mind repeating which request you're referring to?
There is an opportunity for council to ask clarifications when the speaker has completed his delivery.
I beg your pardon. So it's a question of council to the speaker.
So no, I have a point of order. So when I raise a point of order, then I need to be recognized for the chair to explain why I've raised a point of order.
This is why I addressed it to the CAO to get clarification.
Through the chair, I believe that Councillor Isaacson you can ask her to provide a rationale for her point of order to understand why she's raising it.
Thank you. Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you. This is a staff workplace, and I think that there are concerns perhaps of what has or hasn't happened, but I would ask that the speaker speak to impact and not critique staff as it is their workplace. Thank you.
Just saying that the city staff has got the time to go and look at flowers. The city staff will not go and check up and see if Lyft is a good neighbor or the stipulations that Lyft stated, such as security. So who does that fall under? That to keep Lyft to their word? Do we just trust them?
Okay.
Is that
I think the point of order here is councillor respects the multiple tasks that our staff have every day. And so we respect that, and we rely on the challenge that they have in juggling a lot of issues every day. So,
well, I'll withdraw that remark then.
thank you.
Okay. A quick bit of research found that Courtney and Campbell River shelters both have security. How did that happen? This week on the news, Duncan Council turned down a request for an emergency weather shelter until both a suitable location and security were provided. The provider was able to meet these requirements and then came back and got approval. That's all we're asking. And one thing I didn't state at the very beginning is we realize that the homeless need a safe place to shelter. We're not saying that. We're saying that the rules are not being enforced. Okay, so council gave in to blackmail from Lyft. If you don't give us what we want, then we won't open and people will suffer. And does council also realize that people in the community can suffer because of the lack of security? It's time that we look for another provider. Or the warming shelter is what I brought up last time. The Salvation Army has been providing shelter since 1886, 137 years. I believe that they've got the experience to do such. And they have 50 shelters currently running across Canada. This could be number 51. What will it take for the council to hold Lyft accountable? Does it take a senior being injured or killed? When is it enough? Please do not approve this permit without the required security. That's all we're asking. Again,
Thank you.
the people need a place to shelter, but Lyft is not doing it in the proper manner as far as we're concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any additional comments from members of the gallery? Dr. Varma, I see you heading towards the mic.
Thank you, Your Worship, and councillors and Santa Del. You look fabulous. My name is Ash Varma. I have had the pleasure of speaking before you. You're probably sick and tired of seeing my face, but like a bad penny, I keep turning up. I'm here. It's unfortunate. I don't know if there's any of my Lyft friends here because I wanted to congratulate them. I had a chance to download their audited financial statements that are available on their website, and it's actually really very impressive. Myself, having been the president of the College of Dental Surgeons, where we ran with an $8 million budget, and we were able to accrue reserves of about $2.5 million over the span of 3 years. I'm really impressed to see that our friends at Lyft, excuse me, with an annual budget of about $6.2 million, have been able to reserve 1.738 in in reserve funds. That's quite a feat, which shows good financial stewardship and well-organized organization. Which brings me to my point, as I spoke in the last two times, the recommendations of the staff of the city have said very clearly that this permit should not be given unless there were security available. And the issues centered around security and the ability to finance the security. I understand that the city was asked for finances to secure to provide this, to secure the security services. But I'm very happy as a taxpayer to learn how sensitive the councillors are about the taxation issues, especially facing businesses and residences. And LIF said that they were waiting for funds from BC Housing. So according to their own documents, they have in their funds $1.738548, $1,738,548, of which $1.25 million is a restricted fund, internally restricted. I totally understand that. But fully $488,548 are available as unrestricted funds. Having been in a position to play with numbers like that, that means that that money is usable for whatever is appropriate to be deemed. When Ms. Jenkins spoke before council at the last meeting that I attended, forgive me if I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but I think it was the 7th of December, she stated that there just weren't the funds. And the other thing she stated was, we're not talking about a lot of nights that the extreme weather shelter is going to be open to allay concerns of too many people being there. So I'm thinking if it's not too many nights, and I hate to put words in her mouth, but it seemed like it was maybe 8 or 10 nights potentially. We're not talking about a lot of money to get that security. So if I had $488,000 available to me in an unrestricted fund, I would think that maybe if you did 10 nights at $300 a night, that's $3,000. That's not even 1% of that money. That could be utilized for a very, very good purpose, and that is for providing the security from sunset to sunrise as proposed by staff. You've heard Mr. Gibson speak before me and talking about the need for that. So I would strongly encourage council that if you do decide to push this motion forward, that you listen to what staff had said. The monies are there. LIFT has the funds. $1.738 million are available to be utilized. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Do we have anybody online that's requested an opportunity? So we have a recommendation.
Would you like me to read that, Your Worship?
Yes.
I move that temporary use permit 011 to allow non-commercial short-term overnight accommodation use to support the operation of an emergency weather response center until April 15, 2024 on 4752 Joyce Avenue, legally described as Lot 4, Block 19, District Lot 5036, Plan 13353 be issued subject to the applicant addressing all deficiency related to life safety conditions at 4746 and 4752 Joyce Avenue to the satisfaction of the fire chief and the chief building official, and updating the good neighbor agreement for 4746 Joyce Avenue to include 4752 Joyce and provide a copy to the Director of Planning Services for review. If I could, I would like to speak to this.
Yes, we have a seconder, please. Councillor Silka.
Thank you, Your Worship. The presenting problem, as I see it, is larger than just to be satisfied by security when the applied for temporary use permit would be in action. In other words, this TUP 11 is to be an expansion from TUP 005, which is just neighboring right across the alley from Dr. Varma's office. That was also an extreme weather shelter and respite. Now, the respite is the part that allowed it to be used pretty much around a year and not just as an extreme weather shelter, if I understand correctly. That's what respite means. Anyway, the problems that go back years now in this neighborhood are not going to be solved by security when the top 11 shelter is open. The problems are bigger than that. I was prepared to support this motion, basically based on the fact that on December 5th, staff was directed by council to work with Dr. Varma and LIFT to seek solutions, number one. And also, really the real solution for this is the complex care housing that we've been promised for about 2 years now, that I don't see offing anytime soon either. That's a pretty comprehensive solution. Security is not, but here's the bottom line for me, and that is that any organization, the substance of LIFT, taking on responsibility for one aspect of our community, real problems in our community. I don't think anybody in this room will deny that they are looking after some real problems. I also expect of them and anybody else, all of us, to take a larger perspective and look after the entire community, not just one part of the community. So I can't support this because I don't really have any faith in our direction to I don't really see that staff, Dr. Varma and LIFT are going to come to a solution that's going to fix this problem right away. Because like I said, I think really the solution is much bigger, and that is this complex care housing, which is Vancouver Coastal and BC Housing. So how can I conscience not supporting this? Because, you know, there's a specter of, oh, people are going to be outside when it gets cold or really miserable, and that's going to threaten their lives. Well, I've spent a lot more time during my life being in operations of health-related facilities than I have sitting at this council table. And I know that policy doesn't fix things. It's the people who are looking after the situations that the policy is supposed to be directing adequately that fix things. So if people turn up at the door and it's really cold and there isn't a temporary use permit 11 facility to spill extra people from the top 5, what do I think that those staff are going to do? Well, if they don't let the people in the door and maybe break the rules for occupancy in that facility, there's another thing they can do, and it's enabled by a provincial act called the Assistance to Shelter Act with its associated regulations. And of course, that then ends up probably involving the RCMP and cells. And, you know, I don't say this casually, but cells have been a safe final shelter as long as I ever had anything to do with any kind of situation like this, which goes back decades, actually. Now, that isn't something that I just say lightly, because I see the staff sergeant here, and, you know, there's no way that I would wish that kind of grief on him. But the point is that this isn't the end all and be all, top 11. And the real problem is that we're being squashed, this community and this council, between jurisdictions that should be taking responsibility, and that's the province, in other words, BC Housing, and LIFT as a provider for services they have taken on voluntarily. So that's where the problem is, and I cannot, in all good conscience, support this application without the larger considerations being looked after. So I don't support it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Through the CAO, can the chair recommend an adjustment to the motion?
Yes, Chair, you can move an amendment to the motion as it stands.
I'd like to move an amendment to the motion. And the amendment is simply adding a final dot at the end. So right after updating the Good Neighbor Agreement for 4746 Joyce Avenue to include 4752 Joyce and provide a copy to the Director of Planning and Services for review. The next point is to provide professional security from sunset to sunrise. We have a second. Yeah. Do we have a seconder? We have a secondary? Yes.
We might need some clarification on staff for this one, but I believe the reason why this is on the agenda today is because we had in the motion 2 weeks ago to have professional security. And because of the rules of the charter, public notice was given that security was going to be in the motion. And 2 weeks ago, we then debated, discussed, and removed security from the recommendation and passed that, only then to realize the corporate officer corrected us and said, well, because we promoted public security or professional security and then voted against professional security, we then had to re-advertise for today's meeting without professional security. So if we were to vote for this motion, correct me if I'm wrong, corporate officer, will we then go through the circle all over again? And we'd be better off just rejecting the whole thing and just say, if it gets cold, you're out of luck.
Through the chair, unfortunately, you would have to reissue notice. And that would then bring us back to coming back to you in January for you to reconsider this.
Thank you. So the reason I proposed the amendment to the motion was support for what Councillor Southcott said, and also a significant amount of new information that has become available since we last discussed this item. Councillor Doubt.
Yeah. I'm against the amendment. I think we were getting ourselves into an absolutely ridiculous situation. Spent a long time debating this temporary use permit. At our last board meeting, our last council meeting, we came to a conclusion after a long debate. Fact is, staff told us we couldn't come to that conclusion because that one was not advertised in the paper, so we've advertised it in the paper. Again, the concerns I've heard from the public are the same concerns that I heard the previous one. There are nothing new. Councillor Southcott's position is different, but I haven't heard anything specifically different from the public. And I don't want to just go ahead, pass this amendment, do something with the legislation, be back here in another 2 weeks. We could be still arguing about whether we're going to have a cold weather shelter in June or July if we keep doing this. So I beg you to vote against the amendment and do what you will. I will be voting in favor of the temporary use permit when it comes. I thought about it before. I haven't changed my mind. But I think we should defeat this amendment and get back to the main question and decide what we're going to do. And I'd like to talk about the main issue.
Councillor Almeida.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I will also be not in favor of this amendment, as per everything Councillor Dowd said. I did want to, and I would be in favor of the permit. As I said 2 weeks ago, it's not that I disrespect Dr. Varma's comments or anything of the neighbors. In fact, in relation to Mr. Gibson's comments, I think Ms. Jenkins was misquoted there. It's not that Ms. Jenkins feels it's safe across the street for her staff to go to. There's no crosswalk across the street from the current CRC and emergency weather shelter to safely cross the road. I manage a team of 30 people across the city that deliver goods to residents every week, and I set up routes that do not have them cross a major artery in this road because I have teenagers and kids that I'm working with, and I don't want them crossing Joyce when there's no crosswalk. And I think that's the safety issue that she was referring to, not your building. My feeling is with this temporary use permit, if we were debating the original TUP, which will come up for debate in November or October or whenever that comes up for renewal, my thoughts will be a little bit different. At this point right now, we're just debating the emergency weather shelter, which yes, will only be a few days a year. And I feel if we say no to this weather shelter, then we're actually keeping people on the streets, which actually might increase the vandalism that we've been told, versus actually bringing them inside when times are tough. The few times this year we're going to experience this cold weather. So I will not be in favor of the amendment as it stands, but in favor of the motion.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Mayor Wosno. Yeah, I also do not support this amendment. We had a really robust discussion 2 weeks ago, and so my concerns remain. A lot of the same reasons for not supporting this amendment as Councillor Doubt and Councillor Almeida have shared. You know, ultimately, if we require security, it won't open. This is about an extreme weather shelter for a handful of days per year when snow accumulates or it's below zero. And so while I agree there is a bigger discussion to be had about TUP 005, and I'm not denying that there are impacts on neighbors to the CRC and the shelter, there absolutely are. But that's a bigger conversation. This TUP and this amendment puts the TUP at risk, and I'm concerned about, we're talking about life here. That's why extreme weather shelter is open. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor.
I would like to respond. In the last 2 weeks, significant new information has been brought forward, and there was no indication that lift would not proceed if they were required to provide security. So Council will remember months ago, when lift first approached and wanted to get approval, I asked whether or not they had included security in their proposal. They said they hadn't, but they would check to see if they could get funding from BC Housing. In fact, they did talk to BC Housing, and BC Housing told them that there was monies available for security, but that it would probably reduce some of the revenue that Lyft would receive for operations. However, based on discussions with security professionals, the net impact on Lyft of providing security is, as Dr. Varma pointed out, minuscule. So we're talking about an organization that generates about $80,000 a year in interest on the money which they indicate from their financial documents. So for the city to request that they spend a fraction of that to provide security seems to me a very reasonable request. So what is another consideration? Let's look at the potential impact on the community as a whole. Dr. Varma and his family have been providing dental services in Powell River for over 50 years. They currently serve about 2,000 residents. I think most people are aware it is impossible to get dental services in Powell River, and that is why a significant number of people requiring dental services go across the water. So does it seem reasonable that we would recognize the valuable contribution that Dr. Varma and his family have provided and recognize the potential impact if he decides to move to a community that respects what they have done for their community, especially when the cost of security is minuscule. So, you know, when you look at What might drive Lyft to not provide security? There is no rational reason for that, other than Lyft does not operate as a normal not-for-profit society. It's better described as a workers' co-op. And as such, you don't have the normal governance on the board, which would look at impact on the community of a decision which would have very little financial impact on their bottom line. So I think for these reasons, we should proceed. And if Lyft decides, and I don't think they will, not to proceed in providing security, then the one thing we've learned about Powell River is the word resilience. I believe if we went out and asked not-for-profit organizations and volunteers to step up and replace the service that Lyft was going to provide, we will be successful. Thank you. Councillor Palm.
Worship, well said. There are so many aspects to this. The first thing I want to clear up is what happened, why we're revisiting this tonight. And that was when the mail out went out in the area around the overnight shelter area. It included in that correspondence to the neighbors of that facility that the resolution that was coming before council included a reference to security. Am I correct? And then when we came to the council chamber, that was removed from the resolution. And we debated wholeheartedly, as we're doing right now, for a lengthy period of time, trying to include security, and it was voted down. So why we are here tonight is that you have to provide the right documentation to the neighbors so that when they come to the council chamber, they know exactly what the issue is. So tonight, there is no reference to security. That's why we're back here. So here we are again. And Councillor Doubt, you said there's no new information. Well, I'm a little perplexed with that comment because I found out tonight that Lyft has 1.7 in a reserve, $0.7 million they could utilize a portion of for security. I also learned, for whatever reason, and I still don't know the answer to this one, that the neighbors surrounding that facility that were notified had no idea what the good neighbor policy is or was. I can't understand why they don't have that. Somebody is not doing their job. That's a crying shame. When we've got reef going missing and people's doors being banged on at 4 a.m. And the other aspect, Dr. Varma provided all of council and staff with a video of what goes on around his medical clinic. And I can tell you, safety and security, I don't think any councillor could deny after seeing that video that it is not required. That's what is so perplexing as to this discussion here tonight. I just can't understand how they can deny we don't need security. And the neighbors don't need security. We saw it firsthand. So, as I've said previously, to me, this issue is all about safety. And all of our jobs here at this table, the number one issue for our residents is safety. That's what we're talking about here. Not only for the people that use that overnight facility, for the people that surround it and the ongoing nature of what transpires. So safety, and then combat that. Surely, if we were to put safety on the docket, to Lyft, who has already been told by PC Howie the money is available, that they would somehow find a way to make that happen. But we're not holding their feet to the fire, which we should be. So I wholly support the motion on the floor. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councilor Almeida.
Thank you, Mayor. I said 2 weeks ago that Dr. Varma's video that he shared to council moved me. And if we were at this table in 10, 11 months, voting on whether to renew TUP05, my decision would probably be different just based on that video. Because I don't disagree with any of the challenges that Dr. Varma or the neighbors across the road are dealing with. The matter at hand, though, isn't the main shelter that Lyft is operating. That's not what we're discussing right now. It is completely based on the emergency weather shelter that may or may not operate 5 to 15 times over the next 100 or so days. And so if this whole motion can get rejected, we've got the opportunity to split yet again today. And so the whole thing could get rejected and we could be back at square one, or Lyft might be just wipe their hands. And there's been mention of other organizations in the community that can step up. I encourage, whether it's Inclusion, Salvation Army, or any of the other nonprofits in our community to step up. Please, you have 6 to 8 months to put the next application in, because we all know in 12 months or 10 months that discussion is going to be had about what to do about the shelter. But we unfortunately are not discussing the main shelter right now. We're discussing what to do with people in extremely cold weather when the few times it might happen this year. And that's all it is. If we're going to circle back to security, well, the CAO has confirmed that we're going to be back all over again. And it's going to be the beginning of January. Well, if anything, the cold weather might hit over the next 3 weeks, and it's going to be a moot point if we shut it down. So at this point, I say let's vote on the amendment and then vote on the motion at hand. I think we've discussed this till we're blue in the face, and let's move on with whatever the result is.
Councilor Dodd.
Yeah, I'd dearly love to move on to it with it, but I've got a couple more things I have to say. If we were discussing a service that the city was going to create, if we were going to clean this basement out and put cots in here, hire staff, and run a cold weather warming station, then we could talk about how much it was going to cost and how much we were going to spend on security and how many staff we'd hire and how we would vet the staff and how we would take care of their health and safety. But we're not doing that. And nobody around this table has said anything about the city creating a cold weather warming shelter and managing it. I've heard of all kinds of organizations that are waiting to come and open cold weather shelters. The Salvation Army is a great group. They do great work for the city, but they're not sitting here saying we'd like to do it ourselves instead of Lyft. All the other churches and all the other charity groups that could do it are not here. They're not here to say we'll do it instead of Lyft. So when Lyft says they want to do it, and they say if we make them have security, they won't be able to, we've got to believe them. We don't run Lyft. You know, although there's lots of people in the room who would like to manage the organization and tell them how to do it, it's a separate organization. It's not the city. They've asked for a permit from the city, and our job is to decide whether to get it or not. We have an organization that is in charge of public safety. It's the RCMP, and a representative is right here in the room. And they're in charge of public safety and security of the public everywhere in the city, both sides of the street, all over the place. So, you know, I think the amendment is going to just delay the issue and make it even more difficult to come to a solution, and it will get us to January. And who knows, with the weather going now, there may be no cold weather after January. But I'd rather vote on it now, as Councillor Alameda has said, and see what we're going to do and see what people are going to be faced with over the winter. Fortunately, it's a warm one.
Okay, my final comment is Lyft is an organization with significant resources. They have not indicated any impediment putting security in place other than it might cost them a little bit of money. So with 50 years experience, different volunteer organizations, I find that attitude unacceptable. And if you accept this attitude, then you're reinforcing to the citizens of Powell River that we can be controlled by a workers' co-op. And I think that this is unfortunate. If council is willing to bend, and there's a very simple solution that would resolve issues. Do we have any other comments? Councilor Palmer.
Last comment, Councillor Delt made reference that nobody wants to step up to the plate. There's no Salvation Army or church organization coming forward. Well, I have a feeling that one of the reasons they're not coming forward is LIFT is applied to run the shelter. It's a service. They get paid to do so. That's why they're in the business. They have a lot of money. Some of that money should be used for security, sir. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, and we have an amended motion on the floor. We're going to vote on the amended motion.
No,
Point of order.
you have an amendment on the floor.
We have amended on the floor. We will vote on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? The amendment is defeated. We do also have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion on the motion before we call the vote? Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Mayor Wasno. I have to say to Councillor Southcott, I was a bit confused by your comments because usually when someone makes a motion, you support a motion. And so I was a bit confused when you were saying our direction from Eli Mina was if you move it, you should support it. So a bit confused by that. I think there's a lot of wishes that we could have for a better world, for more support from the government, for people not to be experiencing homelessness and need places to go to the washroom and having mental health issues. There's so many wishes that we could have, but what's in front of us right now is, will we provide a temporary use permit for LIFT to operate an extreme weather shelter between now and March 31st for the days where we have extreme weather? I think it would be unethical for us to deny it. And I agree with Councillor Almeida and other concerns on this council that there's a bigger picture here, and we have another temporary use permit for the main shelter up for renewal next fall. And I think we will be having robust discussions at that time. I know LIFT is looking for an alternative space for that. But all of those issues aside, that's not what we have on the table. We have an opportunity to potentially make sure that people remain alive on extreme weather nights, and implore council to vote on the matter in front of us today. Thank you very much.
Any further? Yes, so Southcott.
Thank you, Your Worship. I hadn't planned to speak a second time, but I'm not sure it's clear that I was taking issue with the assumption that if we don't pass this application, that necessarily that is going to put people's lives at risk. I did make the point that there are other alternatives in place currently, and the issue that I have is a totally political issue, and that is that the larger concern, which I think is intimately tied to the application that we are looking at tonight, which has been raised again because this application came to us, is what I am interested in and why I don't support this. So as I mentioned before, the only reason that I can conscience not supporting this is because I firmly believe that there are other options, and they are covered in the material that is in Appendix B. The warming center guidelines refer to the act that gives us that option. So it is my objection is entirely political, and it does devolve on the financial capability, but we can't address safety without just delaying this another 3 or 4 weeks, or the security as we did last time. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
We have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, we'll now move to reports for 8.3 is the 2024 acting mayor rotation. This issue was.
Your worship, for the audience, you might want to just, as it was a tie vote, explain what that means.
I'm going to ask the CAO to please respond to that.
Through the mayor to council, essentially that means that the motion fails and the temporary use permit is not issued.
Thank you. We'll now move to 8.3 was the 2024 acting mayor rotation designation. I have a recommendation, Councillor Almeida.
I move that the should this be 2024? Okay. I move that the 2024 acting mayor designation be assigned in alphabetical order by surname, changing the first of every month, starting with Councillor Elliott in January 2024.
Seconded. Thank you. Do we have any discussion? All in favor? Passed unanimously. We now move to reports for information. 9.1 is a rise and report service agreement for visitors information services. Councilor Almeida.
As the liaison to Tourism Powell River, I don't mind sharing this, but Tourism Powell River has operated our visitor center for many years in our community, and the renewal for that agreement came up as it was ending at the end of 2023. There was also a request from Sunshine Coast Tourism to potentially explore operating that visitor center as they run the centers in Gibsons and Seashelt. Council felt at this time that instead of going with a 5-year agreement with Tourism Powell River, we would continue with a 1-year agreement with a small funding increase, as they had not received any funding increase in over 10 years. And then we will take 2024 to review proposals from both Tourism Powell River and Sunshine Coast Tourism to provide a longer-term contract over the course of 2024.
Okay. Any further questions, discussion? 9.2, progress update, Joint Accessibility and Inclusion Advisory Committee. Deputy Corporate Officer.
Through the chair, I'll just briefly introduce this. So all municipalities are now required to have accessibility plans and accessibility committees. And I just want to raise my hands to the City of Powell River, who put something in motion before I came, which involved partnership with qathet Regional District and the library and the city coming together to have one united accessibility committee and plan. So with that, I'll turn over to Ms. Laporte to give you a status update on this. Thank you.
Thank you. As noted in the report for information you have in your packages, we are underway with the plan. We've met a number of times with the Joint Accessibility Committee. I've received lots of feedback from the committee members themselves, from staff, members of the public, and are working on another draft of the plan based on the feedback to bring to the committee, hopefully for adoption in January. And while the deadline was for September 1st of 2023, we are a bit behind. It sounds like we're still ahead of a number of municipalities out there, and the province has done a number of check-ins with us and are pleased that we're at least underway as opposed to not having started at all. So We're confident in adoption in the early part of the year, next year of 2024. And once the Joint Accessibility Committee has given their stamp of approval on the plan, we'll bring them, each of the three organizations will bring that back to our respective boards and councils for adoption as the city or as the organization's plan.
Follow-up questions? No? Okay, we'll move to report from municipal directors of the qathet Regional District.
I've got a bunch. I recall that at the previous meeting, it went till from 5:30 till about 11 o'clock at night. I said that since the regional district had been quite busy and our time was short, that I would save the reports for tonight, which means that tonight's meeting will be quite long and quite busy. But we'll start with December 6th, 2023. And we had a finance committee meeting that day. Don't usually report on finance committee meetings, but I will now because of all the interesting stuff that was going on. First interesting item is 8.1, which is a budget amendment for the North Side Fire Protection Service, that was to set aside the intention of $735,000 for a new fire truck for the North Side. Fire trucks are a big moment for discussion nowadays. It seems everywhere we're talking about fire trucks. 8.2 was Director's Remuneration and Expense Amendment, and that was to follow the board's policy to increase by 5% Director's annual indemnity. We have a budget amendment for the Savory Island Fire Protection Service, which was to buy a new fire engine for $600,000. And that is moving along. All these things are going to happen. We hit the financial plan draft 1, and probably the most interesting part of that was that there was a motion with that for the board to direct staff to prepare and forward an amendment to the Waste Management Conversion and Service Establishment Bylaw number 523/2017 to increase the requisition limit to a tax rate of 0.4044 dollars per 1,000 of net taxable value of land and improvements in the service area, or $3 million, whichever is higher, $3,005,648. And the committee and the board seek written consent from at least 2/3 of the participant of the waste management service and approval from the directors and municipalities to increase the requisition limit up to that amount of money. Now that's a lot of words. And what that means is all the regional district services are organized by, most of them created by referendum or by bylaw, where they can tax up to a certain amount. So in order to operate the waste treatment plant, the waste management conversion and service, they need to have more money in that. So the effort is to raise that up to an amount that's expected to be the maximum to work for the service. And that has to receive consent from the participants. Who are the participants? The participants are five of the electoral areas and the city. And the participants who need to agree to this increase are all the directors of the electoral areas and the city. And the city does that. The city gets one vote and does that by a motion of council. Recommended also that the board forward a Lasqueti Island Fire Protection Service Establishment Bylaw limit increase to cover the Lasqueti Island one. Talked about using community works funds for the Myrtle Pond water system. They're doing a connection that establishes part of it. And that was the excitement of the finance committee meeting there. And the big numbers that Councillor Palm was talking about are in the financial impact of the first draft of the budget. For the City of Powell River, that basically is an increase in the requisition. That means the total amount of dollars that the regional district would ask from the city is 34.7%, or about $21.41 per $100,000 of the assessed value of a home in the city. Now, you've got some average numbers in there, but the average numbers are the average value of a home in the regional district, which don't match up with the average value of a home in the city. The biggest impact on that is the waste management service. Waste management service is going from 877,000 and a bit from last year to 1.6 million this year. And that is because the construction is coming to an end. We're going to have to start paying for all the money that's being borrowed, and the operation of this facility is going to start, and that's going to have to be paid for. So that's the significant part of it. That's probably about 2/3 of the increase that's there arises from the waste management service. Another significant one is regional parks, and that's $477. Next year was $444,000 in 2023. I made a motion to remove the contribution this year of the regional district to the regional parkland acquisition. That's about $183,000 that goes into a reserve fund. I thought that's low-hanging fruit. That's not going to gore anybody's ox. Should be something, if we're going to be able to reduce something in the budget, that should work. Turns out it doesn't. That motion was defeated. One vote in favor, and all of the rest of the delegates opposed. So one of the challenges of trying to find savings in a budget. We had a regional hospital district meeting, same day, busy day. Agreed on an audit service plan and dealt with the regional hospital district budget, draft 1. And that has got some increases, and how the regional hospital district works is it provides funding basically to Vancouver Coastal Health for improvements and facilities for the qathet Regional Hospital. And what happens is the Vancouver Coastal Health comes once a year and they say, here is the projects we've been able to convince the provincial government to participate in funding, and we've been able to convince the Vancouver Coastal Health Board to assist in funding. And here's what we'd like the regional district to pay. That varies up and down every year, changes all the time. Requisition change for this year for the taxpayer is 15.2%, or a tax rate change for a home of $2.18 per $100,000 of value. But it's a significant amount of money. It's not the biggest thing that's going to be an issue, but there it is. And the hospital district for a long time has been concerned about the unevenness of it, because the taxes go up by a little bit if Vancouver Coastal Health is only doing a few projects, but go up by a lot if they're doing many projects. So we've been considering trying to smooth that out and going to a tax rate that would provide some contributions to reserves in years where there is lower requests, and withdrawing from reserves where there's higher requests. And this year, actually, we're paying for borrowing for previous acquisitions by Vancouver Coastal Health and taking the fund for this year's contributions out of reserves to try to smooth that out. So that increase is lower than it could have been if we were doing it in different ways. And on the same day, we had a regional board meeting for that. I'll go through that too. Nice and slowly and try to hit the important ones. We had a letter from the City of Powell River asking for participation for advocacy in the peer-assisted care teams, which was agreed to by the board. We have a consent agenda. I had correspondence from North Island 911 about the rearrangement of the charges for North Island 911. For those who are curious, North Island 911 covers all the dispatching for police and fire and first responders in our area, in most of northern Vancouver Island, and on a contract basis for the Peace River area. So they do all of that. It's really a partnership between those North Island regional districts and the qathet regional districts. The qathet regional district is about 8% of that. We've rearranged the shareholdings on that to represent a combination of assessments of the property in the regional district and the population. Because after a number of years of study, we saw that, you know, economics will adjust the assessment value, but it's different in all areas. And one regional district might have a big increase in assessment value and a very small increase in population. And other ones may have a very low increase in assessment value, but an increase in population, and thus an increase in calls for first responders, ambulances, etc. So the calls volumes weren't matching the sheer assessment value rate, but with the combination of assessment and population, we're getting very close, and it's just over 8% is the qathet regional district's portion of that, and that goes across the board for call volumes and prices and all of that stuff. So it's a rebalancing, and you know, things don't happen quickly, because I've been on that board for 5 years, and the board has been working on it, started off with a considerable animosity about differences, and then ended up with a whole bunch of happy people on the board thinking we've solved the problem. That was a good one. One sanitary sewer master plan, so they're working on that out. Powell River Public Service Library Agreement Renewal has gone through. Standing committee and board meeting session, all the same things we deal with here, and pretty straightforward, that regional district meeting. And then we had yesterday, and yesterday there was a committee of the whole meeting, a regional hospital board meeting, and a regional district meeting, regional district board meeting. I'm going to report on the regional district board meeting, because the other two meetings basically were either brand new stuff that I'll report on when it gets to the board next month, or just in the regional hospital district, just reaffirming the things that were done at the committee of the whole that I reported on earlier. It's a lot of talking. We had a rezoning bylaw, and rezoning bylaws, also planning is much different in the regional district. I can tell you that rezoning takes up a lot more of the time at the regional district than it does of council, in fact. We had a budget amendment notice for the North Side Fire Protection Service. One of the good things about that was the rare and unusual occurrence nowadays of being able to buy a fire truck for $100,000 less than we had expected to pay for it. So previous one that was expected to be over $700,000 is just slightly over $600,000 for the North Side, as long as the staff could order the fire truck quick enough and get on before next year's prices. So happening all over the place. We finalized the remuneration bylaw. There's a cemetery bylaw amendment, and that might be of interest to people in town, because there are different things you can do with ashes in urns at our cemetery. One of them is place them in the mausoleums, and the other one is bury them underground. And people sometimes like to have their ashes buried together in couples, and previously they've just been burying ashes in an urn or a box, and then when the second member of the couple dies, they have to open a hole and bury it, and that can cause some grief to people. So basically a decision's been made to have a container, a fiberglass container built to put urns in when the ashes are buried. It's a significant change, and it's going to change the burial experience for people, but an interesting thing to do. We went through the Savory Island Fire Protection Service again. And one of the things I was trying to do yesterday was clarify exactly what is weighted votes, what are unweighted votes, and how decisions are made, because there's a lot of curiosity about that. And in fact, when I started asking the question, it turns out there's a lot of curiosity around the board about what's weighted and unweighted. So the cemetery bylaw amendment was directors of A, B, C, D, and the city with a weighted vote. And financial plan, draft 1, is all directors, and it's an unweighted vote. And the corporate officer went through all of the figures. The cemetery amendment is basically because it's a change of a bylaw, and the financial draft 1 is not a bylaw change yet. And it's going. There are some bylaws that you vote on where only one director is affected by the service, and then everybody gets to vote on it. So the city ends up getting a weighted vote on the north side fire engine, which is a little bit unusual. We spent quite a bit of time going through the whole plan of how these weighted votes work, where they don't, who the persons are when we have to increase that waste management service bylaw so that it can collect more. And it was all interesting stuff. So we went through again financial plan draft 1, and the waste management conversion service was part of that, a big part of that. And we went through all the ones that I've talked about previously. So there we are. That's my report on that. And anybody has any questions can talk about that until you're tired of it.
Thank you, Councillor Duke.
Worship, I just have a couple of clarifications, if I may.
Please, Councillor Palm.
Yeah, Councillor Dodd, it's interesting that you brought up weighted vote, because when I read the Peak article on your motion to rescind the $180,000 per park fund, I was surprised that that vote passed and you were defeated. Because that's a financial decision and a weighted vote applies. So it's quite obvious to me that your partner from the city did not support you. Is that correct?
You'll have to ask my partner from the city.
You would?
I was at the meeting, but I don't comment on how other people vote.
Okay, so that's clarification. I guess we got the answer we wanted. So one piece of the information that was also reported in the Peak was in regards to director remuneration. And you have the directors have voted themselves a 5% increase for the upcoming year. And you have a weighted vote on that as well, correct?
Was that a weighted vote? I see.
It's a financial matter, so I'm imagining you would have.
Oh, I'm just checking.
So the regional district for city residents, while we're waiting, is regional district. The way they operate is most city folks is very confusing. But if you've sat on the board, you know full well that the weighted vote matters. Because I can remember being on that board when we held up budget deliberation on a couple of small items when I was on the board, and it would have meant, and that night when the budget was passed, if they did not support our asks that evening, the regional board would have been shut down and out of business. So that's how much weight the weighted vote has. It's quite interesting. So I ask these questions because two city representatives certainly don't seem to be on the same page when it comes to finances. And I have one other question in terms of the waste management. And
I can answer your question if you'd like about the director's remuneration and expenses. That was in the consent agenda on the December 20th meeting. The consent agenda is usually passed unanimously.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it wasn't up for discussion.
So it actually doesn't matter if it's weighted or not, because you have a unanimous vote, it's going to carry. If it wasn't unanimous, if there were people opposed, it would be separated out. So that means that 7 city votes all went the same way.
And just for further clarification, the 5% adds up to over $8,000 for increase. And I think the city is on the hook for 50%.
City pays 50% of the administration of the regional district.
Wages being one.
Yep.
So the final question I have is
Not the city. Actually, the city doesn't pay anything. The taxpayers in the city who pay taxes to the regional district pay 50% of the cost of the service.
and waste management. And 34%, I've never seen a figure like that in all my years here. Very seldom do we see double digit. I think last year we did for maybe double that. And the resource center, my biggest fear, that starts operating for another debt payment and operation being another $1.6 million added onto. I'm just hoping that we can find an operator, a private operation, rather than paying staff. Cost will be.
What those
I just run that out there.
What those costs reflect, Councillor Palm, is the 2016 agreement, I believe, was on solid waste management that set the program and brought about the creation of the Waste Management Center, Resource Recovery Center. All the construction, all the design, all the borrowing has been happening up till now. We're getting to the point where we've made the final amount of borrowing, and now we are paying back the total lump sum of the borrowing that has been ramping up over a period of time. And we are getting to the intersection of paying for the borrowing and actually starting to operate this facility. That's actually good news, in my opinion, when we start operating the facility. The sooner it comes, the better, but it comes with costs. And you and I both know how contracts work. The regional district will be working out how the operation is going to be handled. And we're going to have to make up our mind pretty darn soon, because it's not going to be very long until it's actually operating. As if you drive down the highway now, you can see the buildings coming up and they're actually looking pretty good. But it is going to cost money. It is, it's not a cheap operation. And you have equipment to buy and people to pay. Somebody has to do it.
We only will conclude by saying, Councillor Dout, remember, you have a weighted vote.
Okay.
We have a weighted vote on occasion and for a certain amount of things. And I do want to tell you that, you know, when I sit at the board table, I make decisions on what I believe is in the best interest of the taxpayers, considering the best interest of the whole regional district as a group and a community of interest. And if you decide to use your power as a hammer, you will find that other people have the ability to do the same thing.
All right, let's move to 10.1, which is a proposed bylaw 2736 lease rates.
You want to add anything?
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Mayor Wesno. I will move that City of Powell River Lease Rates Bylaw 2736 2024 be read a second and third time.
Any discussion? Yes, Councillor Isaacson.
Yeah, I'll just speak. This has been in front of council before, and last time we made a slightly different motion than the staff recommendation, just to allow more opportunity for comment from the public or from leaseholders. And so this moves the process along further before adoption.
Any further discussion? Yes, Councillor Almeida.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a clarification from staff as I was virtual for our last meeting, but because we are only doing second and third, I believe we have to bring this back to council in January for an approval, and then give our tenants a reasonable amount of communication in terms of an increase. Do we have a date as to when these increases would take effect? I imagine it's not January 1st. So do we know what the next step is?
Through the chair to Councillor Almeida, I'm going to pass this off to Ms. Matthews to respond. Thank you.
Through the chair, Councillor Almeida, the lease rate will affect different lease holders at different times. Some of them have agreements for a rate to kick in at a different time, but most of them would be when the lease rate comes into effect. So it's not one clear answer, but for most, we could either have direction from council to say they need X amount of time before it would come into effect, or it would be a matter of giving them notice that it is coming.
Additional questions? Favor? That's unanimously. Thank you. I'll move to new business. 12.1 is the development of city-owned properties. I brought this to council as a result of seeing the article about a 43-acre Port Alberni waterfront property development. And again, I've talked to council a number of times about the success Port Alberni Council has had in identifying opportunities to utilize land, to develop partnerships with their First Nation neighbors, to provide various housing options, to provide industrial land, etc. And so the last time we discussed this, the council voted in favor of asking our committee to recommend which properties could be used. And so my recommendation is that staff be directed to return to council with a report recommending a plan to attract and inform potential development partners for the properties to be recommended by the Select Committee for City-Owned Properties. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Palm. And the reason for recommending this is that we've had offers of assistance from Surrey Director of Economic Development, from the CAO at Port Alberni, to help us fast track a process which they found to be successful in getting potential partners to provide detailed proposals to the city. And so what this could do is save us 6 months or a year. We simply wait for the Select Committee to come back. We don't know when that will occur, but this would facilitate, and hopefully when we're sitting here at the end of our term, we will actually have seen 1 or 2 different properties providing opportunities for affordable housing, industrial parks, etc. Yes, Councillor Doubt.
I don't have a problem with the concept, actually, of looking for partners for city land, as long as it's open enough and widespread enough and casts a big enough net. I read the papers too. Yeah, I read an article just the other day about the Tla'amin Nation actually building a bunch of new houses in a subdivision in the village. And they are going to be building, I think, 11 new houses. And a certain number of those are going to be rental homes that are owned by the nation. And that's a great model. And I think our land could very well be used to find a partner to build homes that the city would continue to own as part of a housing authority and to develop on city-owned land. City maintains ownership, and we find a partner willing to build those. But rather than just saying, here's a bunch of land, we want anybody who wants to be a developer and come and make some money on the land. I think we need to look at all the possible options, and using the city's land for a housing authority is one of those options. And if that kind of stuff's in the report, that'd be good. And I'd like to see this get to that committee as soon as they possibly can, so they can get busy and start thinking about it.
Claire Isaacson.
Thank you, Mayor Wasno. The previous motion that council made to refer this to the committee, I don't remember that being about getting recommendations on specific properties. It was about your motion had been about developing a plan for us to move things along. And so I think, yeah, I'm not sure which properties, like, yeah, I'm confused about.
So would you like me to clarify?
Yeah, and what
So
properties are
the original last motion I made was two parts. One was to have staff develop a plan specifically looking at a number of properties. Council decided that it would be more appropriate to have the select committee go back and look at the report that was done in 2011 and was the original reason for putting the select committee in place. And therefore, hopefully the select committee is going to meet sometime in the new year and start this process.
Thank you, Mayor. I think my understanding of what the committee might do based on our referral to them is maybe different than yours. I think I would be interested in getting their advice on, guardrails for a plan that staff could put forward to us. So anyways, I'm not sure if you and I have different understandings, that I don't know if the committee is going to have clear understandings. So that's a little bit confusing for me. I am also keen to learn how we can move forward faster in alignment with community will and our downtown plan, etc. I would actually be, I mean, this isn't the motion on the floor right now, but something that I would be interested in. It sounds like you've had some great conversations. I don't think other members of council have had with folks from Surrey or Port Alberni, and I think our council could learn a few things so that when we as a group are trying to figure out a way forward, we're not muddling as much. And so I would be interested in learning directly from them as well as the experience that you've had. Thank you.
Dodd.
Yeah. If I recall correctly, and I have to look at the minutes, the previous motion that you brought was your motion and you'd made it. And I made a motion to simply refer that motion to the city committee on properties. Didn't change the motion, didn't make any amendments to it. Just referred it to the city committee instead of to the committee to discuss instead of staff. That I had expected that motion would go to the committee, that at some point the meeting of the committee would be held. If the committee wanted any information or reports and stuff, they could ask for that, or they could ask for it through council. I see this motion and I see that it could easily, why not ask city staff to have a report on this and then give that to the committee and be more information for the committee to get their teeth into. I don't think those are competitive or exclusive things where one would prevent the other from happening. I think my idea is that this gets the concept of actually putting the city's properties to use and finding a way to develop them for the good of the community. It can be done, and the committee can do that, and however many reports we get to inform them, the better it is.
Councilor Almeida.
Thank you, Mayor. Thankfully, the motion that we passed at the meeting 2 weeks ago is at the top of our agenda package today. So it makes it easy to reference And I've put the two of them side by side for me here. So I'll read what we voted on 2 weeks ago. That is, council directs staff to return to council with a report recommending a plan. Well, this, I'm just copied and pasted. So report recommending a plan to attract and inform potential development partners for the properties, certain properties that were selected. And as Councillor Dowd suggested, we deferred that over to the select committee. The motion that's on the table right now says staff be directed to return to council with a report recommending a plan to attract and inform potential development partners for the properties to be recommended. So it sounds like, other than it says recommended by the select committee, the wording on these motions are nearly identical. And I was left slightly confused when preparing for this meeting that we were discussing and debating something that we had already previously discussed and had decided to forward to the select committee. And as it's only been 2 weeks and Christmas time, the select committee hasn't had a chance to get together yet. So I appreciate and respect the love the mayor has for the city and the desire to move the city forward. I'm just torn right now as to whether we're trying too much too fast, and whether this motion would be better served in a few months when we are further down the budget plan and the select committee's had a chance to come back with some recommendations. Then staff would actually have a plan with which to properly provide council with a more solid report.
Thank you. CAO of Port Alberta was very direct in saying that their success in forming partnerships with First Nations and others to create opportunities in their community was a result of council making timely decisions and staff running to keep up with them. And so my motion here is simply so that we won't be sitting here a year from now without anything having been done. Any other comments? Councillor Isaacson.
Yeah, I think this motion would be well timed once we get the recommendations from the select committee. I don't know what their recommendations will be. They will be looking at the motion that we referred to them, discussing it, making recommendations. They could be for specific properties. They could be for potential guardrails or constraints on what they would like to see in development partners or a plan. But I don't know what they're going to recommend yet, and therefore I have nothing to direct staff in advance of us receiving something. Like, I think this motion might be excellent in a month or two from now, when we're also discussing what the committee comes back to us with. I think this is us acting preemptively on a hypothetical. That's I think where I'm sitting right now.
Okay, Councillor Palm.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. The reason I supported this because it's fairly clear that Mayor is asking staff to come back to us, provide some guidance that will go on to the select committee. And that's a very important step, because the reason that committee hasn't met since their last meeting before summer was they were asking staff for clarification on their role and what they were to be doing after they selected the properties for the government on the other 8 properties that they were tasked to complete, which they did. So with the change with Mr. Randolph leaving, we were in a conundrum because nobody picked it up and ran with it on staff. And that's why the committee hasn't met since. So this is just a simple ask and being proactive to get staff to work on what the mayor is asking for, so that the select committee has the necessary guidance to get down to work.
Don't.
And, you know, and I thought that the way Councillor Palm had explained it just now was what this motion meant. That staff would get this information, put together the ideas in a plan, and run it through the committee. And the mayor's explanation that he gave just now was about not doing that but about a report coming back to council and avoiding being delayed by the committee. Those are two different things. And you didn't make the motion, Councillor Palm. The mayor did. And what I was going to do was ask the mayor to clarify whether he intends that this report is for the use of the committee or whether it's to be acted on separately. That's a question for the mayor.
The reason I put this forward is based on the advice of Port Alberni that council is the controlling factor. That if they chose to look at a process, then they could pass that on to the select committee. But yes, my motion is to have staff prepare a report to present it to council. If council approves, it can be forwarded to the select committee. Hopefully, we'll be sitting here at the end of our term with something have been done. Any additional discussion on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? 2 opposed, passed. Thank you. I think Councillor Dout's going to be disappointed that we may not be here until midnight. I have to get my computer back here. All right. Questions? Do we have any questions from?
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the opportunity to pose questions. I'm somewhat in a confusion about the status now of the Zunga bus. As I understand it, the extension of it was a tied vote, as was the motion to discontinue it. So I am unsure of what will happen with the bus as of now.
I'm going to ask the CAO if she would answer that question.
Through the chair to the speaker, because both failed, what will happen is the Zunga bus will be discontinued as of the end of this year.
That was my presumption, but it's dangerous for a journalist to presume, Your Worship. Also, on the motion that you just brought forward, I didn't see the vote on that clearly. Could I be advised of how that vote went, please, Your Worship?
5-2.
In
5
favor.
In favor, 2 opposed. Oh, sorry.
4 in favor and 2 opposed. Okay, those were my questions, Your Worship. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Galinsky. Anybody else in the audience? Do we have any? Oh, yes.
I actually have a question, if you don't mind, Your Worship. It's actually to staff, which I don't know if they've had a chance to organize the answer for this yet. But since the current plan is to discontinue the Zunga bus as of 10 days from now, I had posed a question at the committee meeting and then via email as well. Do we have a rough idea of the 1,100 users that have used the Zunga bus? Roughly how many people? I know my wife is one of them, that have a booklet or a bunch, because there's the option on the app for those that haven't used the app to buy a bunch, 10 or 20 rides in advance. So I'm curious if we have a rough idea as to the number of those customers that have been impacted and what the solution might be.
Chair to Council Almeida, our CFO has some information on this.
Through the chair, in looking into this, since it was asked at the last council meeting, we've discovered that there's roughly $1,100 of pre-purchased tickets that would need to be refunded. We have confirmed that we are able to refund through the app, and so it would be a decently seamless process should we receive direction to do that.
Would that need a motion then right now?
Through the chair, I don't believe there would be a motion, but staff would be reaching out to users to understand who would want a refund and by when, and we would be processing that promptly. So forgive me, a motion's not needed, but if direction from staff has been to cancel the Zunga bus, I presume that we would then reach out to current pass holders to refund them.
So Isaacson.
Just a follow up on Mr. Galinsky's question and to your notes. When we go into budget discussions, the current 5-year financial plan 2024 to 2028 currently includes the Zunga bus because you didn't want removal of that to be a staff decision. It's instead being offered as an option to cut from that existing budget. So it's been cut as of January 1st, but it will still be part of budget discussions as an option to cut when we have those discussions in January. Do I have that correct?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
Do we have anybody online? One last chance. Anybody in the audience? Yes.
Your worship, thank you for the opportunity to ask a question to council. And I'm just wondering if under section 3, which puts it on the agenda, does your worship wish to exercise his discretion in the right to reconsider and call back the harbor's vote and offer the residents of this community 30 days or even a little more grace?
As mayor, I've decided not to put that forward, given the rather extensive discussion that council has had on this issue.
Okay. Well, if I might be permitted with just one comment, your worship.
Yes.
The community watched as this very council gave itself grace on at least 4 more items right after that. And I've been made aware of that by people in the community. And I sat in the chambers and watched it happen. I continually saying that they didn't have enough time to read the notes in their package and so on and so forth. Can we put that forward to another time? And so it's a great disappointment to me and many people in the community. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Adjourn.
All in favor? The holidays.